Australians firmly agree the wealth gap in the country is too big, according to the Australia Talks national survey. Here's Casey Briggs.
Here are a handful of statements that Australians strongly agree on. The gap in wealth between rich and poor Australians is too big. CEOs of large companies are paid too much. The Australian economy works to the advantage of the rich. We tend to think people at the top had an unfair advantage getting there. 51% of us agree with that, just 32% disagree. And on that one, it doesn't matter how much you earn. Even half of people at the top think the people at the top got an unfair advantage. But we also tend to agree hard work can make you successful no matter the circumstances you were born into. Our confidence in that has taken a beating in the last couple of years, from 69% in 2019 down 12 percentage points to 57% in 2021. And it collapsed even further for younger Australians. In 2019, 65% of 18 to 24-year-olds agreed hard work can bring you success. But now, only 41% agree. And that's not a trajectory that suggests much optimism among young people about their future.
Well, let's unpack these numbers in more detail now. And we're joined from Melbourne by Professor Roger Wilkins from the University of Melbourne. Thank you, Professor Wilkins. Now, with the statistics, 43% of people think it's impossible for ordinary Australians to get a fair go. And that is up 9 percentage points from 2019. What do Australians think is a fair go?
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't really know what people are thinking about when they answer that question. I guess a lot of people, there'd be a lot of different interpretations of what that means. I think, my judgment would be that it is about whether government policy settings are doing a good job of giving everyone an opportunity for a fulfilling life and a decent living standard. And so I suppose that's where that disquiet is coming from, is feeling that policies could be better in terms of getting a more equitable distribution of well-being, of income and wealth.
To what extent do we have a poverty cycle in Australia, and how hard is it for someone to break out of that?
Yes, we certainly do have a poverty cycle. Both people who fall into poverty are much more likely, even when they escape poverty, to fall back into it. But we also see an intergenerational dimension to this too, that if you grow up in a poor family, you are considerably more likely to be poor as an adult yourself. So there is certainly quite a lot of evidence, and this is from Australian data. We have the Hilda survey, Australia's nationally representative longitudinal study, which is showing that your life opportunities are certainly shaped by the economic circumstances you grow up in. So it's certainly something that there's plenty of room for improvement on.
Now, 4 out of 5 think that the gap between rich and poor is too big. We know that it is growing. What impact is inherited wealth having on that?
Look, to date, not a great deal. Most of the wealth that we see in our community was actually generated during people's lifetimes. And the growth in wealth inequality that we have seen over the last 15 or so years has largely been an intergenerational phenomenon. We've seen a significant proportion of baby boomers in particular doing very well out of both the property market and also their superannuation and other forms of assets. And that's, I think, created a greater generational divide between younger people and particularly this baby boomer cohort. So I think that's really what's driving it. What I think is interesting, this dissatisfaction with inequality, the feeling that the gap between the rich and poor, whether you're measuring it by wealth or by income, while there's a lot of dissatisfaction with that gap, we don't seem as a community to be particularly keen on voting for policies that might reduce that gap. So it's a little bit of a conundrum as to why we don't vote for more progressive tax systems, better income support payments for welfare recipients, removal of the refundable status of dividend imputation credits, you name it. These sorts of policies don't seem to get much traction in the community. So there is a question of whether this is cheap talk, whether people like to complain about the degree of inequality in their community, but aren't really prepared to support the policies that might reduce that inequality.
And 60% of Australians say that they consider retiring comfortably a problem. Does that align with research and reality?
This is a long-standing phenomenon that people are anxious about whether they will be able to live and have an adequate living standard in retirement. What is interesting is it does seem people are more pessimistic than they need to be. That, in fact, we've seen quite an improvement in the economic well-being of retirees over the last 20 or so years. In part, that's been due to superannuation, but it's also reflected the maintaining of the age pension at a level consistent with average living, moving with wages rather than prices. So probably people do show more anxiety than they need to. For example, on measures of things like financial stress, we find that they're actually very low for retirees. The one exception I would note in that regard is that retirees who don't own their home and are reliant on the age pension, they are doing it quite tough. And of course, looking forward, the concern there is that we're looking at more and more people reaching their retirement without owning a home, and so that this is likely to become a growing problem. Although, of course, they will, to counter that, have bigger superannuation balances on average than the current crop of retirees.
Professor Roger Wilkins from the University of Melbourne, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.